Why did I give up on making Adventure Module Guide series, and what am I going to be doing in the future of this channel? Let's talk about that. So my channel grew to the size that it is because I made Adventure Module Guide series. I made them for Tomb of Annihilation, for Curse of Strahd, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, good old Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden, Candlekeep Mysteries, and I like those adventures. And something that's very important about making the Adventure Module Guide series for me in particular is if you've watched me and then you've watched any other of the other people covering Adventure Module Guides, what they typically do is they tell you how to make it better. They typically tell you, oh, here's the scenario, here's the situation, let's make it better. And I didn't want to cover it that way. I wanted to cover it in a way that is appealing if you are trying to run it as close to rules as written as possible. And the reason I did that is because if you are in the camp of getting a adventure module in the first place, you're probably also in the camp of wanting to put in the least amount of work to make it the best enjoyable experience. I think that really highlights in particular Curse of Strahd. When I covered Curse of Strahd, I completely covered it close to as rules as written as possible, but then everyone else that covered it was showing off their own awesome things that they did to change up the scenario, add their own custom areas and maps and monsters, oh my. But as a DM, I figured that if you want to run an awesome adventure for your players and don't want to have to put in all the time, money, and effort to do so, then hey, just put me on in the background, you can listen to my stuff, and you can run a great game for your players. Now, you may have noticed that this channel has dipped and dived in regards of how much content I've put out. There's been times where I've been incredibly busy with life, and there's been times where I simply just didn't have the motivation to put out any videos because I was unmotivated for various regards. But ultimately, I'm trying to hop back into it, and hopefully life doesn't keep getting in my way so I can publish out new content. But why did I stop making Adventure Module Guide series? Why did I give up? And I think the bottom line is, the reason I gave up is because Wizards of the Coast gave up on making adventures. Now you might be asking, what do you mean? They stopped making adventures, they put out adventures all the time. They put out what they call Adventure Module series, but I would argue those are not adventures. I would argue things along the lines of the Strixhaven adventure and the Spelljammer adventure, and looking at specifically the last one here, the Vecna adventure. I don't consider those adventures. I consider those stories. Now, when comparing an adventure to a story, we have the likes of Curse of Strahd and Tomb of Annihilation, which are the adventures. And then for the stories, we've got the things like Vecna and Spelljammer. In the adventures, Curse of Strahd and Tomb of Annihilation, you are shown to a place and you can go to a great number of junctions. You can go explore here, explore there, talk to this NPC if you desire. You can do what you want, and that's the adventure. The adventure is for the players. They get to choose where they go, what they do. Now, for the stories, like for example being the Vecnas and the Spelljammers, there is no adventure to them. When you read that as a DM, you know exactly where your players are going to go. You know who they're going to have to interact with. You know exactly scene for scene, word for word, bar for bar, what's going to happen. The reason why the story adventures work is because your players have to go along a certain path. They have to go to Area A, and in Area A, they'll talk to NPC B. NPC B will direct them to Area 2, and they'll grab the MacGuffin, and then they'll move here, and they'll do that. And it's moving from scene to scene, and instead of your players showing up to the table to play a game of own choices and desires, they are instead showing up to play an improv session where you direct all the scenes. Now, something very important I want to say here is I'm not disparaging the story adventures at all whatsoever. There are a lot of players who enjoy that element of gaming. There is a lot of players who do not want to be burdened with the decision of deciding where they want to go, what they want to do. There is a lot of players who want to just simply show up to the table and presented a fun experience. And for them, they enjoy those story experiences. But For me, that is not why I play Dungeons and Dragons. That's not why I play any tabletop role-playing game. I don't play TTRPGs to be told where to go, what to do at that moment, and have no say or do in the decision making, and have no influence upon the adventure at hand. The reason why I play tabletop role-playing games is because I want there to be that freedom of choice. I want there to be that impact. I want there to be that drive, goal, and setting from the start. I want my players to choose where they want to go, so we get a good feedback loop of you express your desires, I create a game that enhances your desires. Now, I'm a forever DM, but if I was a player, in that same regard, if I was a player and I showed up to the game, I would want to have impact on the matter. I want my decisions to matter. I want to be able to go where I want to go, do what I want to do for the adventure at hand. Now, this is stemming from experience because I have been a player in games that were stories, and I felt that the lack of decision making, the lack of choice, the lack of drive upon the adventure didn't sit well with me. I wanted to do more, but I was stuck to a scene. I was stuck to an area, stuck to one of those battle maps, and I couldn't do anything outside of that purview. Now, Wizards of the Coast, as we can see from the 5e Adventure module lineup, they have transitioned from adventures to stories, and they bounce back and forth here and there and everywhere. We've got completely open sandboxes, like the Tomb of Annihilations, and then we have the completely closed off railroad, I would consider them roller coaster adventures, like things like Vecna. And when it comes to those sandboxy open adventures, I love them. I love playing the game out of sequence. I like playing the adventures where I'm not just going from page to page. I like to feel like my decision matters, and far more importantly as a DM, I really enjoy when I give my players a bunch of options and they get to decide where they want to go, what they want to do, because that gives them their choice, even if it's an illusion or choice because you're giving them an A, B, or C, and all routes lead to the same destination to some degree. I like there to be that decision in the first place. But Wizards of the Coast has, as we've seen, slowly drifted toward making stories. And methinks that that's going to continue into the future with their 2024 rules. Because the first adventure that they're putting out is an adventure anthology. And as we've seen with all of their adventure anthologies that are all created in-house, they are very, very small, self-contained, linear adventures. Now, I've personally never written a 200-page adventure module. I'm working on it right now, mind you. It's a hard process. I'm working on it right now, and it's tough. But I don't know the logistics of how hard it is to create a sandbox adventure that is entertaining versus creating a linear roller coaster story adventure. I don't know which is more difficult. I don't know which is more time consuming. I don't know which is more cost effective. But something tells me that Wizards of the Coast is probably deeming that that is the way to go. They're probably deeming that it's a lot easier to write a linear adventure from A to B because you can write from page to page, scene to scene. Instead of creating a whole bunch of adventure areas where your players could be at different levels, it's a lot easier to create an area where you know your players are going to be at exactly this level and are going to have these options in mind. It's a lot easier to create an adventure where you put a whole bunch of NPCs who've got little crowns over their heads saying that they can't die versus creating an area where that may not necessarily be the case. I'm willing to bet that's the case. I'm willing to bet it's a lot easier to simply write a linear story adventure. And of course, very, very importantly is not only is it easier to create those adventures, I'm more than willing to bet that it's a lot easier to run those adventures. I'm more than willing to bet that if you gave both new and experienced DMs a adventure sandbox or a linear story adventure, if you gave them the two, I'm willing to bet that for both of them, both the new and the experienced DM, it's a lot easier to run that linear story adventure. And one of the reasons why I believe that to be the case is because there's probably a reason why my videos got the views that they did. There's probably a reason why I get so many people telling me thank you so much for the adventure module guides that I've created, because adventures can be confusing. If you create a sandbox, a whole open world, and your players can approach it a number of different ways, of course, a lot of people are going to have a lot of questions. But if you create a linear story where your players move from scene to scene, there isn't any question to be had. And ultimately, I think when you compound all those things, The fact that it's easier to make, the fact that it's easier to run, and the fact that you don't have to deal with too much on the back end in regards of, oh, how do I run this? I'm willing to bet that's why Wizards of the Coast is moving away from creating adventures. They're moving toward making stories. But as I said before, I don't want to deal with stories, I want to deal with adventures. And that is why I gave up. I gave up because they gave up. Now, something very important to note is I gave up on creating adventure module guides for those stories because they simply don't need them. Once again, if it is scene to scene, then I don't need to tell you how to run the scene because it says it right there. Oh, hey, the monster is going to run away. Oh, hey, your players show up to this location and they get to explore around until they fight this bad guy. It's very, very self-explanatory. Ultimately, I want to keep making content that's helpful for DMs. I want to help those people because unfortunately the DMs get shafted a lot of times in all sorts of media because let's be real here, folks, it's a lot more beneficial for a content creator to make content for players, not for DMs. There is far more players than there is DMs. But I want to help DMs. I want to create content that helps DMs. So how do I go about that? Well, I've delved into a number of different ways. I've done how to run series, how to GM series. I've shown off several other TTRPGs. And I just want to keep on expanding upon that. I want to show off more. I want to be able to help more DMs run the game that they want to run. So for that, I'm going to be coming out with a whole bunch of showcasings of different adventures, different books, different TTRPGs, and showing off my own stuff that I'm creating because I'm creating adventures, I'm creating a TTRPG. It takes a bit of time, and my idea is I want to compound a whole bunch of things so I can release them all in one go instead of trickling them out over time. I want to have a big old series of releases one after the other. So hopefully that'll be coming within this year because I'm working extremely hard on that. So stay tuned for all that. And finally, to wrap things up here, this is an open letter to both Wizards of the Coast and content creators abound. Please, please, please make adventures. I know it's tough. I know it's so much easier to write a script than it is to write a big old empty sandbox that your players are going to be filling on their own. I know it's so much easier to create stories. But let me tell you, there's a huge market for it. There's a huge demand for it. A lot of people want adventures. A lot of DMs want to run a game where they don't know what's going to happen that session. A lot of players want to run a game knowing that their decisions matter and they get to explore an adventure the way that they want to. Wizards of the Coast, if you ever hear this, please, everyone knows that Curse of Strahd is the most epicest, famousest, most successful of the 5e adventure lineup. There's a reason why Curse of Strahd is the most award-winningest adventure of the whole lineup. Everyone knows there's a reason for that. One, it's got a great villain, and two, it's a sandbox. Just put out some more of that. Create awesome sandbox adventures for your players to explore around, and please, Wizards of the Coast, please. Now, with all that said, thank you so much, everyone that listened to my Adventure Module Guide series. I get a lot of satisfaction knowing that I helped out a great number of people. To this day, I regularly get comments telling me thank you so much, and let me tell you what, that is just so awesome to hear, right? It is so great knowing that I helped even just one person, because, spoiler alert, when I help a DM, that means I help a whole bunch of players. So I proxy for every one person that I help. That's, I'm helping 5 people on average, right? That is so awesome. I really, really, really am so thankful that I got the opportunity to help a lot of people in making the adventure that they wanted to run and showcasing off how adventures are fantastic and adventures, I believe, are truly some of the most fulfilling experiences in our tabletop role-playing game hobby. So, tell me, overall, do you prefer adventures or do you prefer stories? Do you think Wizards of the Coast is going to ever move back to creating adventure modules, or do you think that they're going to stick for the course and create stories? And do you think content creators outside of Wizards of the Coast are going to pump out the adventures, or do you think that they're going to follow suit in what's successful? But that's going to do it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. Thank you to my Patreons. Thank you all so very much. You are all incredibly awesome. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. Something I would really love for Wizards of the Coast to do is, even if it's only for a year, even if it's a short run, I would love for them to replicate the old school design philosophy of pumping out a 20 to 40 page adventure, maybe one a month, maybe one every 2 months, something like that. I think that unfortunately just that whole 200 page plus adventure module design is just way too much. I think that unfortunately most of the players that end up playing in those don't get the experience the majority of the content because groups fail or because whatever the case may be. It's just like I just feel like less is more. I feel like the majority of people don't end up playing in year-long campaigns, right? I just feel like just create short, epic, fun adventures, create a whole bunch of the different sandbox areas, and then eventually over the course of time, once they create enough sandbox areas, then you can plug them into a world and you've got this big old sandbox filled with a whole bunch of little sandbox areas they're in. I think that should be a fun experience that Wizards of the Coast should have put out. Maybe we'll see. I'm not holding my breath though.